Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Today I'll be taking a look back on the meta for Set 6 Gizmos and Gadgets. With the mid-set Neon Knights right around the corner, now is the best time to see how the meta developed through the first half of Set 6. We'll be talking about items, how well augments have done as a system mechanic, meta compositions, and a few other topics. There's a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Our first topic regarding the meta for Gizmos and Gadgets starts with, of course, items. Items have always been an integral part of TFT, and in Set 6, this was no different. What has been different is there being less of an overall reliance on items being in the forefront of the meta. A lot of past sets made it so items were the focal point of the game. Items were often as important as the champions you gave them to. Of course, in Set 6 that is still partially the case, but in general, there hasn't been a need for running best-in-slot items every single game. This comes down to balancing items to be more well-rounded, but also augments. Augments offset not having the best items by boosting the strength of your board in other ways. The system can also give you additional components or full items, making the RNG of perfect items less of an issue. AD compositions, for example, can flex between each other relatively easily thanks to Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, and Giant Slayer. Then toss in some utility like Runins and Guardian Angel, and you're good to go on a number of carries like Shaco, Samira, Fiora, Jin, Yone, and Urgot. That flexibility means you don't have to worry so much about the items and can instead focus on units and composition. Unfortunately, AP items aren't in a great spot because magic damage boards rely heavily on mana generation and high burst damage. Without either a blue buff or Shojin, the majority of AP carries in Set 6 are underwhelming. Jewel Gauntlet is usually a must-have or a lot of challenges to bump up the AP numbers. This has so far been the main downside to items for the Set 6 meta. That being said, the overall meta in regards to items has been much better for Set 6 than it has been in previous sets that they've taken more of a backseat and let players focus on their boards, economy, and augments. Hopefully this philosophy continues into 6.5 and beyond as it makes the TFT experience much better. When talking about the ranked meta, we must absolutely talk about augments. We'll go ahead and say augments are, hands down, the best thing they've added to TFT since its release. The system gives players interesting choices to make without being overwhelming and makes each game feel different. That said, the meta in regards to augments hasn't been all around that interesting. The reason for that comes down to balance. The augment system is vast and complicated and will have issues as we've seen. This has led to it being fairly obvious from a competitive perspective as to what augments you should take when given the option. It also means some games the players will not be given great options while others in the same lobby will have really good ones. While this is a criticism, keep in mind we're directing it towards the balance of augments as the system itself is a really good one. It comes across harshly, but that's the reality of augments in their current form. The system is good, but they need time to continue working on and tweaking it, which they are doing a great job at. But it will take time, likely beyond Set 6 as a whole, and that's okay. Despite those issues, augments have still made the game far more enjoyable, especially because of how unique each game can feel. An underrated aspect of augments is how uncomplicated they are for such a complicated system. Every game, it's only 3 decisions a player needs to make between a total of 9 augments, so even if there's hundreds in total, you're never overwhelmed. Competitively, this makes the game unique, but for more casual players, it means they can have fun trying new things without needing a ton of info. Compared to shadow items, which required so much upfront knowledge that it was just way too much to learn, whereas augments, you only have to make a few decisions. Definitely looking forward to how they'll continue to improve upon augments as the initial concept has been a definitive success. The next section is piggybacking off of augments as we want to discuss the pace of the game throughout Gizmos and Gadgets. Pace of the game essentially means how quickly players are able to put together a strong board. Faster paced metas, usually revolving around rerolling, have board spike in power much earlier than metas where players focus on playing towards level 8. The faster paced a game is, the quicker players begin to lose health. There's far more nuance to it than what we've explained, but that's the gist of what it means in regards to TFT. For Set 6, the pace has been all over the place and depends a lot on a few factors. When rerolling has been strongest, we've seen compositions built around 1 and 2 cost carries dominating the game. Other times, it's been all about 4 costs and rolling down at level 7 and early level 8s. Then there's been quite a few times where 5 cost carries took over, like when Kaisa was really good. Or the time when Kaisa was good, and oh, that other time when Kaisa did really well. The point being, there hasn't been a consistent pace to the meta for Set 6. This generally comes down to balance, but it's also heavily shaped by the fact that there's really good low-cost units, a lot of strong 4-cost units, and impactful 5-cost units. The only tier being left out is 3-cost units because for the most part, they've been far less relevant than the other tiers. Shaco is the only consistent 3-cost we've seen do well, though recently Heimerdinger has taken root in the meta. In any case, the meta for set 6 has jumped around a lot between fast-paced rerolling and going all in for 4-cost units. While 5-costs do have an impact on the game, the times where they've been the focal point were mainly due to Kai'Sa or an early Tahm Kench, but we'll get into 5-costs more later on. Overall, the lack of viable 3-cost champions definitely hurt the meta for set 6, but there was enough diversity to keep the pace of the game changing from patch to patch. We've mentioned a few champions, but what have been the top compositions throughout Gizmos and Gadgets? Keep in mind we're talking broad strokes here, as consistency is the main key when referring to top meta builds for the whole set so far. There's certainly a lot we can talk about, but a few stick out right away. Challengers, Chemtech, and Assassins. Those three have been a huge influence on the ranked meta throughout set 6. Challengers, of course, are all about the value of Yone as a melee carry. But it's more than that, as the attack speed buff pairs well with other champions like Fiora and Kai'Sa. But Yone is the star, and due to having 2 stat stick traits with a fantastic ability, Yone was always a viable option in the meta. Chemtech has been a bit all over the place, but at the core of it is Bruisers with Mundo and Twin Shot with Urgot. Of course, there's been a few times where Lissandra was bonkers or Warweak threatened to return, but the consistent meta was always a front line of Bruisers backed up by Urgot. And then Assassins, a bane to many players throughout the history of TFT. Gizmos and Gadgets had a lot of assassin builds do well, like Katarina, Shaco Syndicate, and Talon Imperial. Plus a mix and match of those builds with Akali as a late game cherry on top. It'll be interesting to see how set 6.5 does with Assassins, as a lot of the meta relevant champions are being removed. Outside of those 3 types of compositions, there's been a lot of re-rolling so far in set 6. Kog'Maw, 1-cost, a few 3-cost builds, Yordles, and the list goes on. A lot of it comes down to augments, but also the fact a lot of champions just do well when scaled up. Another huge part of the set 6 meta has been flex play. Flex play gets brought up all the time, and for good reason. It's by far the most consistent way to do well because being able to transition effectively fits so well with the theme of augments. Augments help players change up their gameplay and adapt, which is what playing flexibly is all about. An important part of set 6 in regards to flex play are the champions and traits. There are so many utility units to use that fit into a vast amount of boards. The triple of Joy, Braum, and Scion as frontliners, scholars, enchanters, and even more than that. Having so many champions and synergies be splashable for different compositions makes it a lot easier to play flex and overall stronger. So while the meta definitely has had defining compositions, Gizmos and Gadgets as a whole has mainly been centered around playing flexibly. From compositions, let's get slightly more specific by talking about 5-cost champions. The overall sentiment in regards to 5-cost for Gizmos and Gadgets is the majority of them have been impactful in one way or another. Kai'Sa we already mentioned, but has been a staple late-game damage dealer for most of the set. Jace falls in and out of the meta, but anytime 7 Innovator is playable, you know Jace is going to do well. Tahm Kench is possibly the most controversial 5-cost, as getting him at level 7 is a crazy high roll, but they did reduce the effectiveness of Kench a lot when they nerfed him. Victor occasionally does well, but mainly as an extra damage dealer and rarely as the main carry. Jinx is also in the game. Yuumi definitely stands out above the rest, as she's been the best all-around solo champion for all of set 6 so far. Doesn't matter what board you're playing, Yuumi was always useful. We're definitely sad to see her leave in 6.5, and we're interested to see how her role gets filled. There has been an issue with 5-cost champions in the set, and that's balancing how to keep them relevant and playable without causing them to be the best option in the meta. We've seen both ends of the spectrum, where Kai'Sa was the meta for 4 weeks, and other times where 5-cost barely got touched. By far the largest adjustment was to the shop at level 8, lowering the chance of finding a 5-cost by 1%. This has caused a huge shift in the game, making it so 4 costs are the preferred playstyle, and high rolling a 2-star 5-cost can be game-winning at times. Level 9 still being insanely expensive has continued to cause issues with the late game, so hopefully in 6.5, they address these issues to help make 5-cost champions more consistent. To end with, let's look forward to the potential upcoming meta changes in 6.5. We obviously can't predict what will happen, but there should be quite a significant difference in how Neon Knights plays out in comparison to Gizmos and Gadgets. The main reason for this is the removal of 20 champions, most of which are mainstays in the meta. Yone, Yuumi, Janna, Shaco, Scion, and several other champions have been pivotal parts of the game so far. Removing them leaves very large shoes to fill. As such, we may end up seeing a lot less flex play in 6.5 because there's more definitive compositions to play. Players are likely to stay playing their composition instead of splashing in other units and traits, because a lot of those champions are gone and their replacements don't seem to fit as well. Assassins in particular seem to be much worse off, as they lost their main carry Shaco and don't have as good of a late game with Akali being removed. Kha'Zix is a 4 cost, yes, but its ability doesn't seem fantastic for carrying, and no other unit besides maybe Talon seems capable of being the carry. The changes to Assassin alone will have a large influence on the meta for 6.5. Bottom line is that by removing a lot of the meta-relevant champions, we're basically in reset mode going into Neon Knights. It will take time for players to figure out what works best, but our guess is a lot more focused on traits and specific carries. Flex play will continue to be relevant because of the augments, but it is less likely to be a focal part than it was in Gizmos and Gadgets. That's all for today, folks. Gizmos and Gadgets was an amazing first half to a set and introduced the best set mechanic we've ever had. The meta has certainly been all over the place, but by being dynamic, it has made it so that each patch feels fresh. This is definitely in contrast to a lot of other sets that got stale as time went by. Hopefully, set 6.5 can continue this way, as we're just days from the set being released. Let us know in the comment section below what part of Gizmos and Gadgets you've had the most fun with. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.